Welcome to the State of the Biz. My name is Richie Scola. I'm here with Brian Zacharias. Brian, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for being here. Today we're going to be talking about controlling turn and rehab costs on single-family rentals. So, Brian, this is one of the most important pieces of controlling overall costs, obviously, when it comes to R&M. But when you talk about turns and or rehabs, they tend to be, the scopes are larger. Obviously, a rehab would be bigger than a turn in theory. And in the property management, asset management business, the importance of controlling costs when it comes to turnover and turns and rehabs is a critical component. So I thought it'd be a great conversation for us to start with, talking a little bit about how we approach it. But what I always say, and we talk about all the time, is it's kind of like you think of a triangle, right? You're always the secret to project management or project coordination is you're trying to control cost, time, and quality.
Right.
And often you have to give up one of those to get two. The holy grail is if you can get all three.
Absolutely.
But you're constantly juggling those three things. So
With
that being said, just maybe take it from the top, Brian. Talk about, from assessing the property, the single family home, where it starts, and the approach.
Yeah, so I think, obviously when you're looking at a property and you go to scope it, it's vacant now, you start from the road, right? You're going into the driveway. It starts when you drive into the driveway. So, looking at things like the mailbox, is it in good condition?
It's not falling over.
It's not falling over. Yeah, I mean, simple things need to be addressed. But as long as it's structurally sound, it's safe, that it's not going to fall over, it functions properly. That's really, what you're looking for. So yeah, you go to the driveway, make sure there's no major trip hazards, things like that. The lawn, is it in good shape? And, industry standard used to be kind of, you want to be best in the neighborhood. You want to have it stand out and pop. But, from an expense perspective, to do that nickels and dimes you to the opposite of what we've talked about as far as expenses.
Yeah,
so
let me cut you off there because that brings up a good point. So most people don't realize, let's say the average single family rental home is on a quarter of an acre and it's a 2,200 square foot house, give or take a couple of hundred square feet, and it starts at the curb, right? So you've got, like you said, the mailbox starting there, right? Is there a mailbox?
Right.
Is it leaning over? Does it have the door on it? Is it, is it rusted out where an HOA is going to give you a violation? Is the lawn, is there a lawn?
Right.
Or is it a dirt patch, right? So is there a flower bed that has mulch or overgrown bushes? Because it has to be aesthetically pleasing from the street view. So often you could spend a couple of $100 very easily before you walk in the front door.
Easily, if not thousands.
Right, if there's a fence involved.
Yeah. And we used to do that. That was industry standard of, if it doesn't have grass, it's seed and straw usually didn't do the trick. So, you would start, laying turf and things like that, or sod, things like that. You're planting flowers that are ultimately going to die anyway. So you do a lot of this work and spend hundreds to thousands of dollars to get it presentable.
Because it would be on the resident to maintain watering.
Exactly.
So therefore, the sod that you put down today may look great. Or would have looked great, and then it could be dead and or burned up by the sun.
Yeah, exactly. And then you come back around the horn a year, 2 years later, and you do it all over again. So it's kind of,
so that would be thousands of dollars.
Exactly.
Back in the day, in the early days.
Yeah, it's insanity, and that's kind of and everybody kind of learns through trial and error. So now it's to the point where, based on HOA restrictions, things like that, like if you've got a big tree in the front yard, you're not going to grow a good amount of grass. So does it blend with your neighbors? And that's okay. And that's where we kind of, I think that's the sweet spot to find that triangle, and everything is, is the mailbox up? Does the door work? Okay, yes. Is it in brand new condition? No, but it functions. And that's really the standard going all the way through to the front door, of, are the shutters a little faded? That's okay. Like, we used to paint them every time. That was part of the turn scope.
And that adds up.
Now it's, are they on the house? Are they in the bushes?
And they are aesthetically, they're not an eyesore.
They're not an eyesore, exactly. So that's, but yeah, it could cost you, hundreds of dollars before you even walk to the front door. You could drive into the driveway from your car and find $400 or $500 worth of things. So.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. That's something most people don't think of when they think of the turn in a single. It's different from turning an apartment in an apartment complex.
Yeah, it's all inside.
So that's all interior. So really, there could be And every house is different,
Yeah.
right? It's no single property.
And we didn't even
is
get
the
to the
same.
back yet, because the backyard's a whole different
Or
animal.
if there's a fence
So,
up,
right,
and is the gate broken, or there's slats missing?
Right.
Is it leaning over?
Yep.
Is it even, so.
Well, and we'll stay outside, because if you think about that, you go around to the back of the house, your neighbors may have a fence, but ours isn't fully fenced. It's half fenced. There's shared fence scenarios.
Right.
But even that, like if the neighbors have a fence and you can tie into that, that's still expense, right? And you've got to maintain that. So
Correct.
I know that it's attractive to have a fence as far as for marketing, but looking at kind of the stats over the 10, 12 years, yes, you can get someone in there, but at what expense, right? So if you're putting a wood fence up, they don't last, more than 3 to 5 years until they start fading, because you got to maintain them, you got to stain them, and that's tough to do in the business when you have scale. So to be honest with you, the less is more when it comes to maintaining, and I think that's what we've learned is there's a head for every bed.
Absolutely.
So it's just being strategic with your marketing and all of that stuff. But we used to come in, and if there's a section of fence where we could add a section for $500, we would just do it. It made sense. But I don't think it does anymore, because that's $500 times how many, right? And now you're maintaining that, and when that fails, you're repairing it. So. And if it's not taken care of, and it's really the resident, once they're in there, that has to take care of those things. So, and I think most of our residents are fairly new to living in a single family home. That's why they're renting, and they're not used to that. So they don't take care of it. And it's unintentional consequences of the business. But those are the things that you're looking at when you go into it. So really the front yard and the backyard are the same, but when you look at the backyard, that's where most of the people spend their time. So that's where it becomes more challenging as far as if they had a dog and they have tracks and you've got a little racetrack in the back. Like, what do you do with those things?
Right.
And I think, we've gotten to the point where, you just try to cover it up the best you can. But we're not going to go back there and spend hundreds of dollars to lay new sod. It just kind of becomes what
seed
it is.
and straw to cover it up, and hopefully it takes.
And even pressure washing. Like, we used to pressure wash every home. That's $350
depending
to do
on
all
the
flat
size,
work and the siding.
single-story.
It adds up. So I think now it's, again, neighborhood standard. Now if it looks like there's moss growing on the side of the house, that's different. That's a potential violation. But the house has got a little bit of dirt on it, things like that. Like, that's okay. Like, the neighbors are going to have the same thing, and they're outside. So that's one thing that we've looked to kind of, help manage those expenses, is not just assume. We used to go into the driveway and it's okay, no matter what, we're going to pressure wash the driveway, we're going to pressure wash the house, we're going to paint the shutters, we're going to paint the front door. Like, those were things that were real. This is every turn.
Right.
And that's thousands of dollars just in those 4 items I listed off. But you don't need to do that. You know what I mean? You wouldn't do that on your own home. Every year you go to you're not going to paint. So those are the things that from an industry perspective, we've tried to kind of retrain our brains and take our blinders off to it to say, okay, if this was my home, your home, what would we do? To rent this home, and
give it
and
curb
it turns
appeal,
out it's curb appeal, but not perfect. We're not planting things, because I wouldn't do that myself. So. But yeah, that's the outside, and we haven't even gone in the front door to see the rest of the 2,000 square feet.
Yeah, exactly. So now we're at the front door.
Yeah.
What's next?
So obviously the safety and security is number one. So there's 3 things that you really look at as far as, what needs to be done, in my opinion, on turns. And safety and security is number 1. The second is functionality. Does everything work in the home? And then cleanliness. Those are really the 3 things you look at as far as, the institutional single-family rental home. So does the front door, does it operate? Does the lock function properly? Is there any gaps? Is the weather stripping proper? All of that stuff is in play. So you make sure that all of that works, and then you walk in, and then from there you're looking at everything. You're looking at the walls, you're looking at the flooring, does the lighting work? All of that type of stuff. So
checking all the outlets, making sure they properly work, all the windows open, functionality of
and to that point, you mentioned windows. So you're walking through the property, you open the door, check that, you go through, you're looking at the paint and the drywall and all the outlets, make sure everything's, and when you're doing the scope, cleanliness is going to come. So you got to keep that in mind. Like, when you have the house properly deep cleaned, a lot of the stuff is going to be taken care of that's going to be on your scope. So, the switches, the light switch plates are going to be a little dirty. There's going to be some handprints on the wall. Those are things that can be handled with cleaning. Same with flooring, right? So you kind of just put that on, and you're looking for things that are broken or things that are, Is there a wall that's got grease marks, all the way down, or holes in the wall? Like those things you have to address. But from a cosmetic perspective, if the house was fairly decently taken care of, Magic Eraser is a beautiful thing, and that's something that I think we're starting to see now more than ever. Is we can clean walls, and they're not going to be perfect, but that's okay. Before, we would see a couple handprints on the wall, 4 or 5 years ago, and we're painting that wall, and then we're painting the next wall, and eventually it's like, oh well, you might as well just paint the whole house. And 2,000 square feet with the cost of materials and all that stuff now, that's going to be $3,000. So, and we're looking to spend $2,500 from a budgetary perspective to make these turns make sense. So then you haven't even done anything else. So looking at all of the other things, like, do the lights work? Is there any major electrical problems? Does the water function?
All the appliances
is there good water
work.
pressure? Everything works. Like, that's it. That's your scope now. It's, you know what I mean? Like, so you do those things first, address your safety, your functionality, and your cleanliness will come at the end. And then from there, now you take another pass through to see if there's anything that's just totally gaudy. Like, this needs to be addressed. If this were my home, I wouldn't want to present this to a prospect.
Yeah, the rug is all.
Yeah, is it stained to the point
up
where
to worn, stained?
Yeah,
really
it looks
bad.
like there was
Can't
a
be-
dead body
right,
here.
can't
Like,
be-
that level is different. But
Yeah,
a couple
that-
stains here and there, we're going to leave them. We're going to steam clean the carpet, and we're going to leave it because that saves costs and we can keep our rents down. The more we spend on them, the more we have to increase rent to capture that revenue versus expense. So, yeah, but that's really it, is those three things. And looking at mechanicals too, that's another one where, obviously there's depreciation, all kinds of things in play from an asset preservation management perspective. But rule of thumb used to be in the industry, turns or renovations. First time we saw the house, you go to the AC unit, the condensing unit outside, it's 10 years old. The rule of thumb was, if it's 10 years or older, we're going to replace it. Well, that's
Those days are
$4,000,
gone.
$5,000,
Yeah,
right? So
at least nowadays.
Yeah. But and we talked about it before we got on air. If you look at it and the condensing unit's, in a shaded area, it doesn't look like it's overly rusted. Even if it's rusted, there's a lot of things we can do to preserve it, and it could last 20 years. We used to make assumptions on, well, its usable life is only 10 years.
Right.
You and I
It's
probably
just-
have units that are 20 years
I
old.
actually, the unit in my house is
There you go.
18 years old.
Yeah.
And it is on the shaded side of the house, so it gets very little sun.
Yeah.
And I think that's a big part of it. And of
Absolutely.
course, I do get it serviced every other year.
Yeah.
Religiously, so that probably helps too. But
Yeah.
to your point, the old way of thinking, like, it was an automatic
Yeah.
replace, this doesn't work in today's environment. It
Yeah.
never really worked. But
Exactly.
it was a way to standardize it, and that
And
all comes out of the bottom line.
exactly. And the biggest part of doing that was to try to prevent your R&M expenses while it's occupied from going up. But it's one of those things, you've got to take some risk without just throwing all of your cash out there. So I think we see that play out where, you're going to have some that you take that chance, you let it go. You may repair it once or twice, and then you make a decision to put that capital into it. I think that makes the most sense because, you're spending money on R&M, but it's not as much as just wholesale changing all of your mechanicals, because if you start to tick those up, that same rule applied for appliances, your water heater, your furnace, all of those things. You put that threshold on it, and you're leaving cash on the table.
Sure.
So now there's an element of, there's always a human element, I guess, in play. But if you go through the house and it's fairly clean and it looks like the filters have been replaced, there's a good chance you can get away with, all right, let's just replace the filters, put them brand new, and then we're going to let it ride. Everything's functioning. So
it's cooling or heating.
Yeah.
We test all that just to make sure that that's operational.
Stress test the water, run everything, make sure the drains are proper. All of that stuff is really your biggest thing when you're scoping a house, to make sure that you don't have, the residents aren't moving in and they have to pull, things of hair out of the drain because it's backing up.
And that's where it comes. That's where I really
Cleanliness.
Cleanliness
Yeah,
is.
that's
Nobody
gross.
wants to
Yeah.
move into a house that is not clean.
And to
so I
that-
think
yeah.
you give somebody, even if it may be outdated as far as the appliances may not be updated, or the kitchen may not
Yeah.
be updated, or the bathroom,
Yeah.
or it may have carpet or hardwood, or
Yeah.
it may have a hard surface plank. But as long as it's clean,
Clean,
right?
right.
That's nobody wants to move into a
Yeah.
house that's so cleanliness.
Yeah, and if you have a clean house, you could have multicolored walls, and that's okay. Like, I have multicolored walls, and I would not paint the entire thing to be one consistent color to rent it, and somebody would rent it.
Right.
So those are
great
the
point.
type of things
Great
that
point.
we've got to think about, and we are, but it's taken a mindset shift because we started.
Well, I
in
think
the-
early on in the industry, institutional wise, when that came,
Yeah.
it was like we wanted to have a standard.
Yeah.
And a lot of them did a great job
Absolutely.
of bringing that quality to the marketplace. But
Sure.
over the long term,
Yeah.
it could be costly.
Yeah.
So you have to make some practical compromises to still
Yeah.
be profitable.
Yeah, and I think we've been through all of those ebbs and flows
Yeah.
of quality. We've gone too far one way,
run
too far
back too far
yeah,
the other
but
way.
but you look at the rents you get for either side of that spectrum. You're pretty consistent. You're within a few dollars of each
Yeah,
other. You're
yeah.
you're not going to get nobody's going to pay an extra $500 a month for the same house just because you painted all of the walls.
Correct.
They're going to go to the one that is reasonably priced, that may have walls that are red, blue, green. It doesn't
Especially
matter.
now with
So,
affordability.
Yeah.
Even
Yep.
rental affordability is
Yeah.
not quite what homeownership affordability is.
Absolutely.
Really tough, which is pushing more people into the renter space. But even then, the residents are willing to, take something that's clean and safe and may not have all the bells and whistles that but they're willing to rent if it's in the
Yeah.
right, if it's a good asset in the right location. We're seeing that in our business.
Yeah.
They're renting up as quick as we can get them on the market, which is great. So the demand is there.
Absolutely. Yeah.
You just got to put a clean, safe product out there.
Yep. Yeah. And I think, looking at kind of who's doing the work too can help you do a little bit more to it. Another thing that's very common play in the industry when 4,000 plus homes like we have, is to hand out all of this work. We go scope and we hand over that work to, vendors in the market, which is great. We want to take care of the local people, but, as far as managing expenses and getting the best quality, I think, nobody does it better than ourselves.
Absolutely. I would agree.
So looking at that and trying to utilize our resources to the certain extent that we can. There's things you always need specialty trades, and, having licensed contractors is important, but all of the small stuff that we're talking about,
Like handyman stuff.
yeah, handyman stuff, repairing a cabinet that's a little loose, like it's a screwdriver, right? Like any homeowner can do it. So doing that stuff ourselves helps us get the quality we want, saves costs for our partners, and it's good for everybody. And then we can get that product back to the market without, a whole lot of expense. Plus it saves time, right? So if our team's in there doing the scope and they see all of these things, they're building their list of, okay, I need these couple of items to go to the store and grab and come back and get this done. So we condense the cycle time, which is important too, because as we talked in the first segment, that's money, right? Time
Absolutely,
is money.
yeah.
To your point on your triangle, time is money as well. So, I think doing it ourselves as much as we can, but then, our coordinators kind of taking that and saying, okay, our team can do these
There's
things.
limitations in the
Yeah,
scope, whatever
yeah.
the scope of work might
Yeah,
be.
you've got to time it out to try to be as quick as you can in and out. So if our team's in there, they build the list of parts they need, they get it done, knowing when that's going to be done to time the cleaners to come in, and if there is a problem to have the HVAC repaired, we do all that in one foul swoop. So they should be working together in unison to get that turned back to the market, and then ultimately get it back rented again. But talking about mechanicals, and when we do have to replace mechanicals, there's a lot of programs out there that we're taking advantage of as far as working directly with your Goodmans or GE, things like that,
Yeah,
like
like
direct to
manufacturer
exactly,
type
yeah.
stuff, yeah.
And that brings value when you do have to replace it. Not only do you get a big discount as far as labor and materials, you also get 5-10 year warranties behind that too, which is great, right?
Yeah,
so
it's a game changer.
So that's huge. When you do have to put that CapEx, at least now you have comfort in, we just replace this. We don't have to worry about it for another 10 years. When it does fail or something happens, it's warranted, right? So we're cycling through that, and you do it as you need it, so.
What are when we talk about the interior, as far as obviously hard surfaces has been the buzz the last 5 or 6 years. Everybody wants, plank, throughout.
Yeah.
In theory, sounds like it's the best approach, but there is, a lot of times we'll go back like for like if there's vinyl plank flooring in the main areas, but there's maybe there's carpet in the bedrooms. Assuming it could be cleaned, sometimes we'll even replace it. Instead of going back. So there's a lot of different approaches, and we've gone one side, we've gone the other. So it's so much nowadays about controlling costs, and with the last several years, just the cost of labor and materials have gone up so dramatically that's made it really challenging to keep the budgets in line. So these kinds of decisions, kind of replace like for like, instead of reconstructing and ripping something up and having to tie it in or replace more than necessary is kind of a practical approach these days.
Yeah, and it's two things. I think everybody knows better, right? So originally it was, let's replace going into a home. When we purchase it, we put hard surface everywhere, and some would put it everywhere, the entire house, which is a crazy amount of money. Yes, it's sustainable, it lasts longer, but then you also have the factor of people want carpet, people don't want carpet in their bedrooms. So those type of things, we were making assumptions off of my opinion versus your opinion. So that's where it's kind of a mishmash. But I think, to your point, if you look at it, I think the wet areas, which we don't have anymore, we have newer vintage product. But if you would go into an older home that had carpet and where maybe the vanity is in a bathroom, we've seen
I've
that,
seen
right?
that.
Like
that's old school.
Like that, that doesn't work, right?
That
like
doesn't work.
You've got to have hard surfaces where you have potential for water leaks. So that's just kind of common sense. But doing the like for like, I think is the best value add. I think, really, if you look at it, our average residency is 3 years, somewhere in that range. So the thought of let's put plank everywhere, for 3 times the expense of throwing carpet in a few rooms, it just doesn't make sense. Like if there was unlimited funds behind it, great. Yeah, that makes sense, and you set it and forget it. But that's not the case. So we've got to be strategic.
Where we see that a lot is in a lot of the build to rent, which has been the buzz the last 5 or 6 years.
Sure.
Too. So you're building it right out of the gate with vinyl
doing it
planks
right
around.
on the front end,
and that's great if you
But the older stuff, you get what you get. That's where you have to make those decisions. And it used to be okay to say we purchase a home, let's just scope to blow it out and put plank everywhere. That's not the case anymore, because rehabs, just because it's considered a rehab, it's still money, right? Cash is cash, and cash is where we're at. So,
and sometimes you have to make those decisions to make a deal, to acquire an asset, to pencil it out.
Yeah,
you have to compromise the scope somewhere, because you got to make the numbers where it's got to work out from a cap rate perspective, and sometimes an extra. What was going to be a $40,000 renovation at a $30,000 renovation, it works in the buy box, and those sometimes it's scope considerations that get us to that point where we can make it work. And
like for like is the easiest methodology to have when you have multiple people in the field, because it kind of takes the think work out, because everybody's going to have opinions, and then that's when you get it gets lost in the shuffle. So like for like, I don't think is going to hurt anybody, and then you're only doing it where it's necessary, right? So it's only small portions of the home, instead of saying, well, I'm replacing this room in carpet, so let's just do the whole thing. That used to be a thing that happens. Like, I'm replacing 2 bedrooms with plank, let's just replace the entire thing. Those days are over. So,
and in reality, if you think about it, there's some 14 million-ish, give or take, single-family detached rentals in the country, of which 96%, 97% are owned by mom-and-pop investors.
Right.
So the institutions own the other 3 or 4, call it 2 to 4. The mom and pops are not taking the same.
Right.
They're going. I could tell you, they're taking a very like for like approach. So the majority of the competition in that you would be dealing with as an investor is mostly going to be. I mean, you're going to have the institutions. They have a huge presence. There's no doubt about it. But the mom and pop like for like approach is really what you're up against as far as competition wise. So.
Exactly. Yeah. So and it seems to be working, right? Like
absolutely.
If you walk into a home, you and I have seen, kind of both sides of it, but at the end of the day, it doesn't really make a difference, as far as you could walk in a home and we put plank in it, we painted everything, it's got brand new appliances, and then go next door to one that we're kind of in this new model of neighborhood standard, and you really don't know a difference once it's clean. Like that's where it kind of the finish work is, right? Do all the stuff, make sure everything functions, the cabinets are sound, nothing's going to fall off the doors aren't going to fall off the hinges, everything. But you get somebody in there, actual cleaners, to do a true deep clean, take the globes off, make sure there's no bugs in them, wipe down all of the nooks and crannies, windowsills, you could walk into those homes. It smells fresh. It smells new. This one's freshly painted. This one's just, it's got some scuffs here and there, but you're not going to tell the difference. You're going to be like, oh, wow, this floor plan's really good. I could see my bed being here. And I'm not worried about that because, my kids might.
Right. But if something was really nasty, we would paint it, if it deemed, but certainly that like for like approach is the approach today to really control the cost. But we certainly do paint from time to time when necessary. It's not just carte blanche. Like
it's not the slums. It's
right. Well, back in the apartment days, that's pretty much. But everything is the 1 bedroom, the studio, the 2 bedroom, 3. They're all cookie cutters.
And you go and you spray it one color and you move on. Exactly. Yeah, it's not the same. And you got trim work and all that stuff that comes into play. So easier said than done. But
so and then you have garages, right? So you got to look at there's been over the years, in addition to the interior, let's move to the garage, right? So. Let's talk a little bit about some of the items.
There's not much to talk about. The garage is a garage.
Yes, but remember back in the day, it was
we used to paint the floors. We used to paint the walls.
Those days are gone.
It was an extension of a living space. It's not conditioned space. It's so again, it's clean, functional.
Yep.
As long as there's no curse words painted on the walls, because it's unfinished for a reason. The builders leave it unfinished because it's not conditioned and it's meant to store cars or really cars, but nobody uses it for cars anymore.
Junk.
So, junk. But that's important because we had that prior life and with a bigger company than we are at the moment. We had that challenge where certain people were going in and they were painting garage floors with epoxy and all that stuff, and it's $800, and it's like, well, but it's Florida and it rents. So it's also Florida and it would rent if it was just concrete with an oil stain.
Right. Right.
So that's something that garage door openers, that's kind of a just common play now. Everything has them, to your point, like with the new vintage, it comes with the home. Making sure those operate, make sure that the tracks are sound, make sure it's safe, the door's not going to fall onto the car or people, like that's important. And that's it. If there's a couple dents in the garage door, so be it. As long as it's not going to impact its operation and it doesn't expose it to any potential safety hazards or theft, which it wouldn't anyway. We've got the door to the house. That's all it is. It's really just you walk through and you clean it. You know what I mean? It's not going to be a deep clean, but make sure that it's swept and there's nothing crazy there. But get all the cobwebs down and that's it.
Yeah. What about as far as the roof and gutters? Right. That's something that we don't often think about until you're out on site, and depending on whether there's canopy trees in the area. Does that require extra landscaping that you don't think of when you're looking at the asset on in a spreadsheet? Or is the roof at the end of its life, or is a couple of tabs or
nice thing is with newer vintage we know kind of the life of the roof because it came with it, but they're and it's that's a tough one because I'm not a roofer. It took me a long time to really understand what I was looking at because of those things like the market condition of the weather patterns and things like that. It may look like it needs to be replaced, but asphalt shingles fade and they wear, and the trees, to your point, the canopies and things like that, but trees laying on roofs, things like that definitely deteriorate, so you have to take care of that, right? You have to trim the bushes back from the house because that's ultimately preserving the asset. The gutters, depending on the market, it's not entirely necessary. There are certain markets. Texas is one of them I can think of top of head. There's some areas that have erosion issues, so from a long-term kind of asset preservation, we look at those markets and say, okay, we may need to make the decision if it doesn't happen to add them. But if it doesn't exist before, there's a reason for that, right? Like unless you can tell they were removed, but make sure they're cleaned out and make sure that, if they have them, great, we'll keep them. If they're starting to fail and we feel like that's not a necessary thing to have, we may remove them. Those are the things.
Which can be that in and of itself can be like everything else. It
costs money.
Could cost thousands. Depending on the size.
Because we're not
going
to send our team up to a 2-story house to try to hang off and trim a tree. So you've got to contract that out, do it properly. Same with gutters. Like if we don't want our team to have to climb a 2-story house and hang from the roof to clean gutters out. So that's a good point that we've got to make sure those things are taken care of. But it used to be it doesn't have gutters, we add gutters. That's not the case anymore. That adds up. That's a lot of money and a lot of these are custom made. So, but the roof, I think that's the biggest expense, obviously, and
really doing an interior inspection will tell you a lot. Getting up in the attic, seeing from the inside out, the water stains.
Yep. You can tell by the boards in the attic kind of where you stand, and if it looks like you have nothing and the outside looks decent, then you roll with it. You know what I mean? And if not, you have somebody come inspect it, and then you make a decision from there. Get a proper roof inspection, and then make that decision. But it's not, it used to be, it looks faded and gross. It's gray. It should be black. Let's replace the roof for $12,000, $13,000. That's just what we did.
Yeah.
So
we probably have how many items are on our standard scope, just checklist?
I know
it's pretty comprehensive.
Yeah, there's 15 to 20 just items, and that encompasses a lot of small things.
Yeah,
but
subcategories.
A lot of those things we talk through of functionality, cleanliness,
and this
operation.
is assuming when we say that a turn scope is different from an initial rehab, right? So a turn is this property was purchased, it was renovated.
Yep.
A resident was living in it, they moved out. So in theory, a lot of these major mechanicals were probably addressed in theory.
Right.
Maybe some of them weren't, and they were deferred.
Yeah.
So, that's what, when I say turn, that's what I mean versus our initial rehab. Hey, we just bought this asset. When we bought it, we inspected it, and we knew that the roof needed to be replaced. We knew that the hot water heated it. We were going to paint that. That was all considered in the scope of work. So that's going to be done up front to harden that asset, right?
Absolutely. And I think to that point, that's valid. So to your point, for the viewers that don't know, when you purchase a home, before you even buy, you underwrite kind of what you're going to do to the property, right? So you can plan for a little more than a normal turn. But even then, I think, to start buying again, we're probably going to see the industry shift towards, you're still going to consider it a rehab on paper, but you're going to look at a lot of the same things you look at for a turn to be able to buy homes, and then just kind of maintain it that way. But yes, up until now, which nobody's buying just because of where the market
rates
is,
are on the market,
but
inventory.
But yeah, that's what we're talking about now. But I do see a world when in order to start getting institutional players buying again, the renovation scope is going to be kind of an enhanced turn. You may make the decision to replace the condenser closer to what it used to be, but it's not going to be the same, and that's what we learned is some of these homes, you don't need to upgrade them as much as we have been, because you're going to have the same cost downstream. But mechanicals would be a big one that I think we look at.
Yeah, no doubt.
And get those warranties right on the front end, build that into the price of the home, and then everything else is kind of nickel and dime, easy stuff that we can manage through what we just talked about.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, this was great, Brian. I definitely, we were having this conversation, with some of the team, and I thought this would be a worthwhile conversation to just have on video, share it with the audience.
I hope it's useful. I don't know what we talked about, but hopefully we play this back and it's informational. It sounded good.
The thing in when you have every home is different, right? So in different markets, so it's hard to say that every scenario is going to dictate what the scope is, right? We have the checklist of things that we're looking at, and that's kind of what we wanted to kind of highlight. But
absolutely.
In summary, no, it's hard to say everything is a $2,500, $3,500 or $1,500, whatever it is. It's not. It depends. The long and short is it depends.
It depends, and it ties back to the first segment of this on taking care of those residents so they take care of the home, so you don't have to even worry about most of the stuff we just talked about.
Absolutely.
You go in, you clean it, and you rent to the next person.
Absolutely. So. I remember when I moved out, this is going back in 2000 when me and my wife had our first apartment, and it was the first time we both rented an apartment together, and when we were moving out, we purchased a house and we were moving out, and it was like, hey, you didn't realize like you had to clean if you wanted to get your security deposit back, you had to scrub the oven. Yeah. You had to touch up, paint the wall.
Yep.
Like it had to be in the condition. We shampooed the carpet. We shampooed the carpets.
Yeah.
We had somebody. I think I rented a machine or something. But anyway. I mean, that was the kind of expectation back then, and that's what we did. But and we still didn't get 100% of the deposit.
It's
back,
crazy.
So.
Yeah. And that's we do that same thing where it's like there is a certain expectation of what you leave it as, and we're not going to, take advantage of people's deposits, but there's got to be a strict expectation of the way you leave it because of all of these things we talked about. It adds up, and that security deposit to be able to get people to rent the home isn't enough usually.
And more often than not, unfortunately, what we experience is that a lot of people it looks like they left in a rush, and there's stuff behind that could be a trash out involved that we didn't even talk about. A trash out, right?
Trash out $1,500 usually average.
Yeah, they left
before you even start.
Furniture pieces, garbage, whatever, inside, outside. So that's another thing. But
and then you have double the clean after you get the trash out. It's a whole thing. Yeah, it's a trickle. So,
awesome. Yeah. Well, I appreciate the having a conversation, Brian.
It's great.
This is helpful to the audience. Feel free to give us a thumbs up if you have some things that you experience out there. I'd love to see some comments. Feel free to drop a comment to us, and we'd love for you to subscribe and follow us, and maybe hit that little alert button, get notified when we put some more content out. But until next time, we will see you soon. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thanks, Rich.